Where are they now? MTV VJs. The people who played the videos then and now. Written, produced, and directed by Barron. Narrated by Morgan Robinson. A note on this book. Everything you are about to hear is built from the public record. Interviews these people gave, broadcasts that went out to tens of millions of living rooms, announcements they made themselves, obituaries written by people who loved them. Nothing here is invented. Where a life turned hard, we tell you the truth of it, but we do not linger over the wreckage, and we do not pretend to know a person's heart better than they knew it themselves. These were mostly very young people who took a job that had never existed before, introducing music videos on a channel nobody believed in. And the job made them a strange and intimate kind of famous, the kind where an entire generation considers you a personal friend it has never met. They are owed the same warmth in the retelling that they gave the camera every afternoon. Some of the people in this book are still with us, still on the air, still building second and third acts the channel never predicted. Some of them are gone. 4 of them, in fact, and one of those losses is so recent that the flowers have barely arrived. We will hold all of it in the same hand, the wins and the hard roads, the empires and the quiet exits, because that is what it means to ask the question this whole series is built on. Not who they were when the video ended and the camera cut back to their face. What happened after? Where are they now? Introduction: the people who played the videos. 1 minute past midnight on the 1st of August, 1981, a rocket climbed off a launch pad and a voice said, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll." Then a song played, and the song was a joke and a prophecy at the same time. Video killed the radio star. The channel that played it was so small and so new that it was not even available in Manhattan, where it was made. It reached a few cable systems, mostly in New Jersey, which is why, in one of the great origin stories in American broadcasting, the 5 young people hired to host the thing had to pile out to a bar across the river that happened to carry it, to watch themselves make history on a television bolted above the beer taps. Nobody in that bar fully understood what had just been switched on. A few thousand households in the Garden State had just received the 20th century's last great broadcast invention, and the rest of the country was about to spend a decade demanding its cable company catch up. The 5 people on that screen had a job title nobody had ever printed on a business card before. Video jockey, VJ. It sounded like a novelty, and in the beginning it paid like one. What it actually was took years to understand. A VJ was not a star exactly, and not a disc jockey exactly, and not an announcer at all. A VJ was the friend who had the records. The one who sat cross-legged in your living room at 4 in the afternoon, told you what mattered, played you the thing you had not heard yet, and looked directly into the camera as though the 2 of you had been talking all along. Movie stars lived on mountaintops. VJs lived in your house. They wore what you wore. They mispronounced things and laughed about it. When they said, "Stay right there," you stayed. And the country handed them its children. That is the part that is easy to forget now, in a world where every teenager carries an infinite jukebox in one pocket. For a stretch of about 20 years, if you were young in America, the sound of your life arrived through a handful of faces. They premiered the videos everyone would imitate at school the next day. They took the phone calls on the request lines, actual telephones with cords ringing off actual walls. They stood in a glass window above Times Square while a street full of teenagers screamed up at them like the building itself was famous. They told you, gently, on an ordinary April afternoon, when the music broke your heart. Consider the sheer range of what the job asked. In a single shift, a VJ might interview the biggest star in the world, read a postcard from a kid in Nebraska, vamp through a technical failure, and introduce a world premiere the entire country would be arguing about by dinner. There was no school for it. Radio people had the voice but not the face. Actors had the face but not the spontaneity. Journalists had the questions but not the hang. The channel needed all 4 at once, in somebody young enough to be believed. and it needed them live, with no writer and no delay. Small wonder the people who could actually do it turned out to be some of the most durable broadcasters of their generation. The wonder is that anyone could do it at all. Then the job itself began to vanish. The channel drifted from videos to reality shows, the internet swallowed the premiere, the request line became an algorithm, and the people who had been the most familiar faces in youth culture found themselves holding an expertise the world had quietly stopped selling. There is no support group for former VJs. There was no manual for being the ex-best friend of an entire generation. Some of them stayed behind microphones and simply never left, and are on the air this very morning. Some walked away on purpose, to woodshops and photo studios and pulpits and farms. Some fought their way back from strokes and diagnoses and addictions with the same audience watching. And some of them we lost, one only days ago, which makes this walk feel less like nostalgia and more like a family calling itself together. So this is a walk back through the launch crew and the night shift, the rap hosts and the metal hosts, the news desk that made a music channel matter, the alternative nation and the Times Square window. 44 names are coming. Some you will remember instantly. Some you will be startled to discover you never forgot. Some where a floor manager is counting down from 5 and the red light is about to come on. Let us go back. Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll. Start with the 5. They were hired in a hurry in the summer of 1981 for a channel that half the music industry considered a tax write-off in progress. A radio veteran, a Philadelphia disc jockey, an actor from Alabama, a rock journalist with a famous voice, and a college kid barely out of the campus radio station. No one could tell them what the job was because the job had never been done. They invented it live, 5 days a week with no delay and no net, and in doing so they became the founding family of an entire way of being young. 45 years later, here is the scorecard nobody in that New Jersey bar would have predicted. 4 of the 5 stayed broadcasters for life. 3 of them are on the air this very week. 1 of them is in the Radio Hall of Fame, and 1 of them we lost too soon, and all 5 of them remain, to a certain enormous generation, family. Everyone else in this book walked through a door those 5 opened. Nina Blackwood. The voice came first. Husky, warm, a little smoky, the sound of somebody who had stayed up too late in the best possible way. Nina Blackwood was a musician before she was a broadcaster, a harpist of all things, and when the channel launched, she became one of the very first faces the audience ever saw, the rock and roll big sister with the tousled hair who plainly loved the music more than the camera. For millions of kids, hers was the voice that explained the 80s while the 80s were still happening. Here is the lovely thing. It still is. More than 4 decades later, Nina Blackwood has never really stopped doing the job she helped invent. She co-hosts the big 80s Top 40 Countdown on SiriusXM on the weekends, and her voice goes out on 3 syndicated radio shows besides, including the long-running Absolutely 80s, which means that somewhere in America at this very moment, it is a safe bet that Nina Blackwood is introducing a song you dance to at a school gym. She has scaled back over the years, by her own easy admission, and in a career retrospective interview in the spring of 2025, she looked back on the whole improbable ride with the good humor of someone who knows exactly how lucky the timing was. A musician who answered a casting call for a job that did not exist and ended up narrating a decade. The harp, incidentally, was real. She was a serious student of the instrument before rock and roll claimed her. Classically trained fingers introducing hair metal videos, which may be the most 1980s sentence in this entire book. And her endurance has the simple explanation she has offered all along, which is that she never treated the chair as a launching pad to somewhere better. The music was the point when she was starting out, and the music is the point now, and audiences can always tell the difference, which is why hers has never left. There is no scandal in her file, no bitter chapter, just 40 years of showing up to play the records. Where is she now? She is on the radio, still the voice of the 80s, and the decade she soundtracked has never once had to find a replacement. Mark Goodman. Every launch crew needs the one who already knew how to fly the plane. Mark Goodman came to the channel from Philadelphia radio, a working disc jockey with the curls of a rock star and the delivery of a man who had done 1,000 shifts before this one, and it showed. He handled the interviews that mattered, sparred famously and publicly with David Bowie about the channel's early failures on black artists, a moment that has aged into one of the most replayed pieces of tape the era produced. And he carried the place with a professional cool the format badly needed while it figured out what it was. The punchline of his story is that there is no twist. Mark Goodman never stopped being a disc jockey, and he is arguably working harder at it today than he did in 1981. He hosts a daily 6-hour block on SiriusXM's 80s on 8 channel, 7 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon Eastern, 5 days a week, which is not a nostalgia cameo. That is a shift. That is a lunch pail. Most men his age with his resume are giving keynotes about the old days. Goodman is on the air while you are eating breakfast, doing the actual job, still telling you what the song is and who played on it, and why it mattered, because somewhere along the line it became clear that this was never a stepping stone for him. It was the destination. There is also something quietly touching about where the shift happens. The satellite channel he works is a kind of reunion in progress. His old launch partners just down the schedule. The audience the same, kids grown into commuters, and the platform itself, fittingly, was once another bet on a new way of delivering music that the smart money laughed at. Goodman has now ridden 2 broadcasting revolutions from the inside, and he treated them both exactly the same way, by showing up prepared and doing the hours, which is why he survived them both. Where is he now? He is in a studio with the microphone open, 6 hours a day, the launch crew professional who never once landed the plane. Alan Hunter. He was the one having the most fun, and it was not close. Alan Hunter was an actor and dancer from Birmingham, Alabama, who had appeared in a David Bowie video before the channel scooped him up. And of the original 5, he was the loosest on camera, the one doing bits, mugging through segments, treating the whole enterprise like summer camp with a budget. Audiences loved him for exactly that. He made the revolution look like a good hang. What he built afterward is the part that deserves more attention than it gets. Hunter went home to Birmingham and became a genuine civic force, co-founding Workplay, a beloved live music venue and creative complex, and helping found the Sidewalk Film Festival, which has grown into one of the South's most respected film events and helped turn downtown Birmingham into a place people drive to on purpose. That is a legacy measured in other people's opening nights. And the microphone never let him go either. He hosts a daily block on 80s on 8, Monday through Thursday afternoons, plus time on the classic Rewind channel, and in recent years he has relocated to St. Louis, a southern showman turned Midwestern neighbor who commutes to the 80s by satellite. Of all the answers to the question of what to do with early fame, his may be the most replicable and the least practiced. Take the visibility home. Spend it where you are from, on institutions that will outlive the memory of why anyone recognized you at the ribbon cutting. A venue is a machine for other people's best nights. A film festival is a machine for other people's breakthroughs. He built both, and they are still running. Where is he now? He is on the air 4 days a week, and in the founder's photos of half of Birmingham's creative revival, the class clown of the original 5, who quietly turned out to be the institution builder. J.J. Jackson. Every young crew needs an elder, and the first 5 had a great one. J.J. Jackson was the veteran in the room, a respected rock radio man out of Boston and Los Angeles who had been friends with the giants of the previous decade, who had introduced Led Zeppelin on American radio when the others were in grade school, and who brought to a brand new channel the one thing it could not fake, credibility. The artists trusted him. The kids could tell. He explained the music like a man who had been backstage for all of it, because he had. And he did it with a gentleman's warmth that made the loudest music feel like it belonged to everybody. He stayed a broadcaster after the VJ years, back on the radio in Los Angeles, doing the work he had always done. And then on March 17, 2004, driving home from dinner in Los Angeles, J.J. Jackson suffered a heart attack, and he was gone at 62. He was the first of the original 5 to leave us, and the grief from his old colleagues was the specific grief you feel for the person who taught you how to do your job. More than 2 decades later, when the surviving VJs talk about the launch, his name still arrives wrapped in the word gentleman. There is a reason the young channel wanted a veteran in that first chair. The new format was asking artists to trust it with the only thing they had, their music. And trust is the one asset a startup cannot manufacture. Jackson had spent 2 decades earning it the slow way, on the radio, in the era when radio was everything, and he lent that standing to a channel full of kids without hesitation and without conditions. Every VJ who came after him, in a real sense, worked inside the credibility he carried through the door on the first night. Where is he now? He is in the bones of the whole profession, the elder statesman of the first night, the man who lent a brand new channel his hard-earned credibility and never asked for it back. In memoriam, J.J. Jackson, gone in March of 2004 and honored ever since. Martha Quinn. She was hired about a week out of college, and for the rest of the decade, she was America's kid sister. Martha Quinn had been answering phones and pulling shifts at the NYU campus radio station when she walked into an audition that changed her life. And something about her, the bangs, the brightness, the total absence of cynicism, made her the face the whole channel got remembered by. Polls at the time said as much. If you close your eyes and picture an MTV VJ, there is a decent chance you are picturing Martha Quinn, and there is a decent chance you are smiling. The road since has asked more of her than the smile suggests. In 2023, she was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, a thing she has spoken about openly and without drama, and she came through treatment and back to the microphone because of course she did. These days, she is the only member of the original 5 who left satellite radio for the old-fashioned kind, and it is working. She hosts a syndicated midday show for iHeart that airs on roughly 40 stations across the country. The kid sister of 1981, now a daily companion for the same listeners, 40 years later, in their cars and kitchens. And in 2025 came the honor that puts a bow on all of it, induction into the Radio Hall of Fame, the campus phone answerer from NYU now enshrined alongside the giants she grew up imitating. She has also become the era's happiest historian, the original VJ most likely to tell you the whole story of the launch night, minute by minute, with an enthusiasm that has not dimmed by a single watt in 4 decades. Some people survive their youth. Martha Quinn appears to have kept hers on retainer, and the audience that grew up with her can hear it every midday in the first 10 seconds of the show. Where is she now? She is on about 40 radio stations every midday, healthy again, and in the Hall of Fame. And somehow, 4 decades on, still the one you would trust to watch your dog. The second shift. By the late 80s, the channel was no longer an experiment. It was the weather. It was on in every dorm room and every den, and the second wave of hosts walked into a job that now had expectations, catchphrases, and 100 million eyeballs. They were hired to be bigger, faster, and stranger than the founding 5, because the channel itself had gotten bigger, faster, and stranger. Some of them became the most famous people of their particular year. And what happened to them next is some of the most surprising material in this entire book, because the second shift produced, among other things, a podcast pioneer turned preacher, a woodworker, a minister, and a man who plays the organ at hockey games. Downtown Julie Brown. Wubba wubba wubba. If you know, you know, and if you do not, no explanation will quite capture what it was like when Club MTV came on, and a British former dancer with a gap-toothed grin and legs up to the ceiling turned an afternoon dance party into appointment television. Downtown Julie Brown was glamour with a wink, the host who made the velvet rope feel like it was being held open just for you. And for the back half of the 80s, she was one of the most recognizable women on American television. The lovely secret of her story is how little the job description ever changed. She is still the party's host. Today she is on the air daily at SiriusXM, holding down the 90s on 9 Channel, spinning the same era she once ruled from the Palladium dance floor. And when the 80s cruise sails in 2026, she is on the talent lineup, hosting the floating version of the party she started 4 decades ago. There is something quietly perfect about that. Other people in this book had to reinvent themselves. Julie Brown simply kept the invitation open, decade after decade, and the guests kept showing up, older now, sunscreen in their bags, still wanting the same thing they wanted at 16, which is for downtown Julie Brown to tell them the party has started. And the catchphrase, for the record, has never been retired. She still deploys it, on the air and in person, with a professional's timing and the delight of someone who knows exactly what those 3 nonsense syllables do to a listener of a certain age. Catchphrases are usually cages. Hers turned out to be a key, and it has been opening the same door for 40 years, the one marked, "You are invited." Where is she now? She is on the radio every day and on a ship stage every year, still the hostess of the longest-running dance party in American memory. Adam Curry. The hair had its own zip code, and the man under it turned out to be one of the most consequential people in this entire book, which nobody, and we mean nobody, saw coming. Adam Curry was the impossibly tall, impossibly blow-dried host of the channel's biggest countdown years, the VJ who looked most like he had been grown in a lab to stand next to rock stars. The industry filed him under haircut. The industry filed wrong. Because while his colleagues were learning the television business, Curry was teaching himself the internet early obsessively, back when most of the entertainment world thought the web was a fax machine with delusions. He left television and chased it, and in the middle 2000s he helped invent something you may have heard of because you are listening to a cousin of it right now, podcasting. They call him the Podfather, and it is not a nickname he gave himself. It is simply the record. His own show, No Agenda, has been running since 2007, thousands of episodes deep, one of the longest continuously running podcasts on Earth, and he has spent recent years building open tools for the medium he helped create. And then his story took the turn nobody had on their card. Adam Curry found God. He was baptized at the start of 2025, spoke about his conversion on Dutch television, and by 2026 the former face of headbangers countdown culture was at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention promoting Godcaster, a platform for churches, with a speaking date booked for the fall. The man has now been early to 3 different revolutions: music, television, podcasting, and whatever this next chapter becomes. Where is he now? He is behind a microphone he built himself, preaching the gospel of open media, and these days the gospel itself, the haircut who outthought an entire industry twice and may be working on a third. It is worth being plain about how unlikely that resume is. Television hosts do not, as a rule, invent media. The distance between introducing a countdown and helping architect the distribution system for the spoken word internet is the distance between playing records and building the record player, and he crossed it largely self-taught in public, while the industry that had employed him assumed he was a haircut on hiatus. Agree or disagree with any chapter of his story, the pattern is undefeated. He keeps arriving early to things the rest of the world swears will never matter. Kevin Seal. Some people treat fame like a mortgage. Kevin Seal treated it like a rental car. He arrived in the late 80s as the channel's resident absurdist, a deadpan, rubber-faced host who seemed to be conducting a low-key experiment on whether television could tell he was kidding, and his loopy segments made him a cult favorite in the exact years the channel was at its cultural peak. He hosted the flagship shows. He was, briefly, one of the most familiar faces in youth culture. And then, with the spotlight still warm, he simply handed back the keys. What followed was not a fall. It was a choice made early and kept faithfully. Seal did voice work in New York, moved to Seattle, and became a professional woodworker, an actual craftsman making actual things with his hands, and by every account the center of his life became being a full-time dad to his son, who is deaf, which is the kind of job that makes hosting television look like a hobby. These days, by his own account, he has found perhaps the best gig in this entire book. He plays the organ at San Jose Sharks games. Sit with that. The man who once introduced videos to 30 million people now plays the charge riff while large men in skates collide. And by his own telling, he could not be more content. Where is he now? He is at a keyboard in a hockey arena and a workbench in a shop. The VJ who figured out before almost anyone that the cameras were optional and that a good life mostly happens at close range. His old segments, meanwhile, have become a quiet cult on the internet, passed around by comedy writers who recognize a forerunner when they see one. That deadpan, anti-television stance arriving a full decade before irony became the house style of an entire generation. He was doing it first, on the biggest stage in youth culture, and then he left before anyone could make him do it forever, which may be the most Kevin Seal joke of all. China Kantner. She was rock royalty before she could drive. China Kantner was the daughter of Grace Slick and Paul Kantner of the Jefferson Airplane, which meant she grew up backstage at the 60s themselves. And when the channel hired her as a teenage VJ in the mid-80s, the symbolism wrote itself. The children of the counterculture were now introducing the counterculture's grandchildren. She was young, funny, and game, and she later moved into acting with roles through the 90s. Her real story, the one she tells herself these days, is deeper than any credit list. China stepped away from acting, married, and settled in Malibu, and after struggles with substances that she has spoken about herself, plainly and without varnish, she got sober. Then she turned around and made her recovery the engine of her life's work. Today she is China Eiler, an interspiritual minister who serves as a minister for substance use disorder and recovery at a community ministry in Pomona, California, walking with people through the exact valley she knows by heart. There is a beautiful symmetry available here if you want it. Her parents' generation preached liberation through the doors of perception. Their daughter found hers in the long, unglamorous discipline of getting well, and now she holds the door for others. And the music never quite let go either. In June of 2025, she stepped on stage and sang with Jefferson Starship, her father's band, Blood and Harmony, reunited for a night. Where is she now? She is a minister in Pomona with her mother's fire and her own hard-won peace, proof that the most radical act available to rock royalty was recovery. And notice what her title actually is, because it is not honorary. A minister for substance use disorder and recovery is a working post in a working ministry. Weekly, unglamorous, mostly invisible labor with people in the hardest fight there is. And she chose it over every softer version of a celebrity afterlife on offer. The famous name got her nothing in those rooms, which may be exactly why she loves them. Dweezil Zappa. The name alone was a broadcast standards meeting waiting to happen. Dweezil Zappa was the son of Frank Zappa, one of the most fearsomely original musicians America ever produced. And when the channel put the teenage guitar prodigy on the air as a VJ in the mid-80s, it got exactly what it hoped for. A funny, sharp kid with famous genes and real chops introducing videos like someone who had grown up at the dinner table where half the music business got roasted. The decades since have been a study in inheritance, in every sense. Dweezil became a serious guitarist by any measure, and he has spent much of his adult life as the devoted keeper of his father's staggeringly difficult catalog, touring it note for note with a precision that has won over even the original bandmates. There was a long and public dispute within the family over the Zappa Trust after their parents' deaths, and it deserves exactly one sentence here, which is that it was settled years ago, the family reconciled, and it is past. What is present is the road. In 2026, he announced a 34-show tour called Like Father, Like Son, marking 20 years of the project he built to honor his dad, running from Phoenix in late October to Las Vegas in early December. Think about that arc for a moment. The kid VJ who once cracked jokes between hair metal videos has spent 20 years as the most rigorous curator in rock, performing music most players will not even attempt. Where is he now? He is rehearsing, somewhere, music that is nearly impossible to play. the son who turned an impossible inheritance into a working life, and the tour bus rolls again this fall. The tour's name, like father, like son, carries more freight than a poster can hold, because the whole project has been an argument, sustained for 20 years, that his father's catalog is not a museum piece but living repertoire. Music meant to be sweated over on a stage, not filed in a vault. Sons of famous fathers usually spend their lives escaping the shadow. Dweezil walked directly into his, turned on the lights, and got to work. Pauly Shore. The Weasel came in through the side door and briefly owned the whole building. Pauly Shore grew up literally inside comedy. His mother ran the comedy store on Sunset. And when the channel handed him Totally Pauly in 1989, his surf-logged, slang-slinging alter ego became the it of the era. For 5 years, until 1994, he was the channel's clown prince, and Hollywood came calling with a string of 90s comedies that made him, for one strange stretch, a genuine movie star. Then the wave went out, hard and publicly, the way it did for a lot of 90s stars, and the culture spent years using his name as shorthand for exactly that. Here is what the shorthand missed. He never stopped working, not for a single year. Pauly Shore has spent the decades since on the road as a touring stand-up comedian, club after club, city after city, and in 2026 he is still out there, dates across the country, doing the job his mother's club raised him to do. He has made documentaries about his own strange ride, including Pauly Shore Stands Alone, a surprisingly tender film about touring small towns with a famous name and an uncertain place. And he hosts a podcast, Random Rants, where the Weasel voice occasionally surfaces like an old friend doing a bit at a reunion. The industry wrote him off 30 years ago. He declined to countersign. Where is he now? He is on a stage somewhere this weekend, a road comic with a famous past and a full calendar, and the punchline the 90s made of him turned out to have a better third act than most of the people telling it. The documentaries are the quiet revelation. Stripped of the Weasel voice, what is on screen is a surprisingly reflective man doing honest inventory on a strange life. The son of the comedy store still trying to make the room laugh and no longer afraid to let the room see the effort. Comics respect him now in a way the box office years never bought him, and you suspect that is the trade he would have taken from the beginning. Julie Brown. Yes, there were 2 of them, and yes, they were both named Julie Brown, and yes, everyone was confused, including, occasionally, the channel itself. This one is the American one, the redhead, the comedian, and she was not a host so much as a one-woman genre. Just Say Julie, which ran from 1989 to 1992, was a scripted, satirical fever dream in which she mocked the very videos the channel was airing, a court jester operating inside the castle, and it was years ahead of its time. She had already co-written and starred in the cult film Earth Girls Are Easy, and recorded the immortal parody songs that made her a comedy legend, including a certain homecoming Queen anthem too gleefully dark to describe on a family audiobook. Her afterlife has been a comedy writer's afterlife, which is to say everywhere and just under the radar. She co-wrote songs for Disney's enormous camp rock movies, meaning an entire generation of tweens sang her melodies with no idea of her body of work, which may be the single funniest fact in this book. She has turned up as a guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race, where she is revered as a foundational text, and she has been developing a stage musical of Earth Girls Are Easy, bringing the whole thing full circle. Comedy history has been slowly correcting the record on her for years, the way it eventually does for women who were too far ahead of it. The satire she was performing inside the channel, mocking the machinery from within the machinery, is now simply how the entire internet talks about pop culture. Everyone is doing Just Say Julie now, mostly without knowing it, and this paragraph is a small down payment on the credit she is owed. Where is she now? She is writing, performing, and being rediscovered by each new generation of comedy nerds who cannot believe she was doing all of this in 1989, the jester who outlasted the castle. Yo and the Bald. 2 shows changed the channel from a jukebox into a map of the culture, and they could not have been less alike. In 1988, MTV Raps put hip-hop on national television daily, and it is genuinely difficult to overstate what that meant. A music the industry had spent a decade calling a fad suddenly beaming into every suburb and small town in America, hosted by people who plainly loved it and lived it. And on Saturday nights, Headbangers Ball gave the leather and long hair nation 3 loud hours of its own. Between the two of them, the channel stopped being a format and became a country with several states. Remember what the map looked like before. In 1987, a kid in rural Nebraska had functionally no way to hear a new rap record or a new thrash record. No station would touch either. And then suddenly there they were, every week, in the living room with hosts who treated the music like it was obvious. Because to them it was. Entire regional scenes, entire record store arguments, entire careers in both genres trace back to those time slots. These are the governors of the 2 loudest states in the Union. Ed Lover. The Come On Son face alone deserves a pension. Ed Lover, alongside his partner Dr. Dre, hosted the daily version of MTV Raps, and together they became the morning uncles of hip-hop's golden age, funny, warm, completely credible, interviewing every rapper who mattered in the years when every rapper mattered. He gave the culture the Ed Lover dance, a piece of choreography so joyfully simple that it outlived the show, the decade, and arguably the concept of dancing on television. He never left the microphone. Ed Lover built a long second career in radio, most recently in New York, and when he and his co-host exited their city station at the end of 2025, the exit was simply a station change, not a sunset, because his syndicated show, The Ed Lover Experience, kept right on rolling across classic hip-hop stations around the country. And the internet gets him too. His podcast, Come On Son, is more than 400 episodes deep and still going in 2026, the catchphrase of an entire generation's exasperation, now a thriving cottage industry. There is a lesson in his durability. The golden age hosts who lasted were the ones who genuinely loved the music more than the fame, and Ed Lover has now spent nearly 40 years proving which one he was. There is also the matter of legacy you can verify with your own ears. Every hip-hop morning show, every 2-host chemistry format, every countdown with jokes between the records is running on a template he and his partner drew freehand in 1988, back when nobody in a suit was sure rap on national television would survive a season. It survived the century. The uncles built better than anyone knew, including them. Where is he now? He is syndicated coast to coast, and 400 episodes into telling the culture lovingly to come on, son, the golden age uncle who never stopped showing up for work. Dr. Dre. Let us be clear for the record, this is not the billionaire producer from Compton. This is the other one, the first one on national television, and his story is the bravest thing in this section. Dr. Dre, born Andre Brown, was the burly, bespectacled, endlessly funny half of the MTV Raps morning team, a Long Island radio pioneer who had helped put hip-hop on the air before most of America knew its name. For years, he and Ed Lover were the faces of rap's arrival in the mainstream, and the warmth between them was the show. The years since have asked him to carry more than any man should. Dr. Dre has lived for decades with type 2 diabetes, and the disease has taken from him in ways that are hard to say plainly, so we will say them respectfully. He lost his eyesight in 2019. In 2020, he lost his right leg below the knee. Those are the facts, and here is the bigger one. He is still here, 61 years old now, and by every recent account, including a long interview he gave in the spring of 2026, he remains funny, sharp, grateful, and genuinely optimistic. A man who talks about his life with more light in his voice than most people bring to good news. He has turned his health into his mission, speaking openly about diabetes so that other people, especially black men of his generation, take it seriously earlier than he did. And he has hosted a health-focused radio show, The Doctor's Appointment, on LL Cool J's Rock the Bells platform. The culture he helped introduce to America has rallied around him in return. And those who have heard him lately all report the same thing, that the voice is unchanged, quick and warm and completely unembittered, and that a conversation with him still ends the way his broadcasts always did, with the other person feeling better than they did going in. That was always his gift. The disease took a great deal. It did not get the gift. Where is he now? He is at home in the culture he built, blind but not diminished, an amputee but not defeated, telling his story so that somebody else's story goes differently. And if you want to know what dignity sounds like, go find that man laughing. Fab Five Freddy. Before the channel ever hired him, he was already in the lyrics. Fab Five Freddy, born Fred Brathwaite, is name checked in Blondie's Rapture, which tells you exactly where he stood in 1981, at the precise intersection of downtown art, graffiti, and the new music coming out of the Bronx, personally connecting Basquiat's world to the block party. When Yo! MTV Raps launched its weekend edition in 1988. Freddie was the host, the tastemaker's tastemaker, conducting interviews in a bucket hat with the unhurried cool of a man who had seen every scene start. And now, at last, comes the victory lap he never bothered to take. In March of 2026, he published his memoir, Everybody's Fly, and the reception has been the sound of the culture standing up. Long interviews on public radio, magazine profiles, the works. A founding witness finally telling the whole story in his own voice. Wild Style, the pioneering 1983 hip-hop film he starred in and helped will into existence, has been restored in 4K and celebrated all over again. And a documentary he made about black cowboys and riders in Florence, of all subjects, has been making the festival rounds. Some pioneers spend their later years litigating their place in history. Freddie just kept making things until history came to him. The memoir's reception has carried a distinct note of collective apology, a culture realizing it had let one of its founding witnesses go under-celebrated for decades, and he has received it all with the unhurried cool that was always the whole brand. Cool held that long at that temperature is not an act. It is a constitution. Where is he now? He is on the book tour he earned 4 decades late and right on time. The man who introduced America to its own greatest cultural export, finally taking his bow. Ricky Rachman. Saturday night, midnight, a skull ring tapping a microphone. Ricky Rachman ran the Headbangers Ball through metal's loudest years. A Hollywood club owner, his cat house was the epicenter of the Sunset Strip scene, who talked to every band in leather pants that the late 80s and early 90s could produce. He was not a polished broadcaster, and that was the entire point. He was one of them, the fan with the backstage laminate, and the Metal Nation trusted him completely. What the Metal Nation did not fully know at the time was how hard the ride actually was. Rachman has since gone public with all of it. The addiction, the jail time, the bankruptcy, the whole gutter tour, and he has been in recovery for a long time now. A road he talks about with the specific bluntness of a man who is done performing. He wears the past the way old road cases wear stickers, visibly and without apology, and the effect on a room is the opposite of a downer, because there is nothing heavier than a secret and nothing more contagious than watching a man set his down in public. In fact, he has turned the telling itself into the show. In the summer of 2026, he launched a 22-date one-man tour called One Foot in the Gutter. And as this book goes to air, he is out there on the road, city by city, standing on small stages telling the truth about the big ones. His personal life took a hard turn this year. He announced in May of 2026 that his marriage was ending, and we will leave it at the plain fact, as he did. The rest of the calendar stays loud, an ambassador role with a NASCAR race team, the annual Headbangers boat cruise sailing again in 2026. Where is he now? He is on a stage in some club tonight with one microphone and no band, telling the story of how the party nearly killed him and the truth saved him. And the Metal Nation, older now and sober curious itself, is packing the room. The request line. Before we go on, spend a moment inside a piece of machinery that no longer exists. because the whole era lived inside it. The request line was a telephone number. That is all it was. You called it, usually from a kitchen, usually with a parent yelling about the phone bill, and you asked a stranger in New York to play the video that was currently rearranging your entire adolescent nervous system. Millions of kids did this. The lines jammed. And on the other end of that number, eventually, physically, were the people in this book. That is the thing to understand about VJs that no other kind of fame ever quite replicated. The relationship ran in both directions. They read the mail. They took the calls. They stood in shopping malls while entire zip codes of teenagers showed up just to be near the person who played the songs. The algorithm that took over the job does the same work now, faster, smarter, and completely alone. Nobody has ever loved an algorithm, and no algorithm has ever looked into a camera and told a heartbroken kid in Ohio that this next one goes out to anyone having a rough night. Keep that telephone in mind as you meet the rest of them, because it explains the strange durability of their fame. The audience did not admire these people. The audience knew them, or felt it did, which the heart files in the same drawer. And when the calls stopped and the job evaporated, every one of them had to answer the same question the rest of this book keeps asking, which is, what do you do when the number gets disconnected but the love, inconveniently, does not? The faces of the golden era. The early and middle 90s were the channel's imperial phase. The videos had budgets like small films, the beach house was a national daydream, and the VJ job had become the most coveted gig in youth broadcasting. A chair that could launch you anywhere, or nowhere, with no way to know in advance which ticket you were holding. The faces of that era are now scattered across the whole map of American life. A chaplain, a media coach, a Cannes celebrated actor, a marketing executive, and at least one great love story. It was also the era when the job quietly professionalized. The founding five had invented the chair. The 90s hires had grown up watching it, studied it the way earlier generations studied Carson's desk, and arrived with actual designs on the culture, which is why this section's afterlives run so far and so wide. Here they are, the class of the golden era, then and now. Daisy Fuentes. She was a first, and she made it look effortless, which is what firsts are never allowed to admit it costs. Daisy Fuentes came out of Cuban and Spanish roots by way of New Jersey and became the first Latina VJ on the channel, working in 2 languages across 2 continents, hosting for the American audience while anchoring the channel's international expansion, and then planting a flag in fashion and beauty that made her one of the most visible Latina entrepreneurs of her generation, with brands that did serious business for decades. She was building what the world now calls the influencer economy back when the word for it was just work, and she did it carrying the extra weight every first carries, the knowledge that if she stumbled, the door she had opened might quietly swing shut behind her for the next kid watching from New Jersey the way she once watched. It never swung shut. That is the resume line underneath all the other resume lines. Her present chapter reads like the last act of a romantic comedy that had the good sense to keep going after the credits. In December of 2025, she and the singer Richard Marx celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, one of those second marriages that both parties describe with the slightly stunned gratitude of people who did not expect the universe to be this generous twice. And here is the detail that earns her the section opener. In January of 2026, on her husband's album After Hours, Daisy Fuentes received the first songwriting credit of her life, on a song called Magic Hour. Think about that. 40 years into a career spent introducing other people's songs, presenting other people's collections, modeling other people's clothes, she finally has a copyright with her own name inside the music. They turned up together at the Latin Grammys in the fall and at the Music Cares Gala this year, glamorous and visibly delighted with each other. Where is she now? She is a songwriter at last, and half of one of the entertainment industry's genuinely happy marriages, the first Latina VJ still quietly collecting firsts. Kennedy. The glasses were doing satire before she said a word. Kennedy arrived in the alternative era as the channel's resident contrarian, the fast-talking, horn-rimmed host of Alternative Nation who interviewed the flannel generation with a prosecutor's glee and a class clown's timing. She was polarizing on purpose, the VJ you argued about, and she has spent the decades since being argued about at a national scale, which suggests the channel knew exactly what it had hired. After the video years, she reinvented herself as a broadcaster and commentator, and she built a durable second career in cable news, culminating in her own nightly show, called Simply Kennedy, which ran for nearly a decade before ending its run in June of 2023. That ending was an era turning, not a departure, because she remains at the network to this day, hosting her podcast, Kennedy Saves the World, and appearing regularly as a panelist on the network's ensemble shows, still fast, still horn-rimmed, still constitutionally incapable of leaving a hot take unexpressed. Her personal news is the happy kind. In December of 2025, she announced her engagement. The through line from the Alternative Nation desk to now is simply the persona itself, fast, prepared, allergic to reverence, and the durability of that act across 3 decades and 2 entirely different industries is its own answer to anyone who ever assumed the horn rims were a costume. They were a warning label. Where is she now? She is at the same desk job she has held for years, a podcast and a panel chair and a ring on her hand. The Alternative Nation kid who grew up to make a living doing exactly what she did at the old channel, which is saying the spiky thing out loud and grinning about it. Bill Bellamy. He came to the channel from the comedy clubs, and he brought the clubs with him. Bill Bellamy was the host of MTV Jams and one of the network's most reliable 90s presences, a handsome, quick Newark comic who moved between the music world and stand-up with total ease, and who is long credited with introducing the phrase booty call to the American vocabulary during his Def Comedy Jam years, a contribution to the language that no dictionary has ever properly thanked him for. His answer to the whole fame machine turned out to be the steadiest one available. Work the road, love your family, repeat. In June of 2026, he and his wife Kristen celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, a silver anniversary in an industry where paper is considered a long run, and he marked it the way a road comic marks everything, by going back out on tour. He has roughly 41 dates on the books across 2026, hard tickets in real clubs, including a summer weekend run at the Baltimore Comedy Factory in July, and his recent tour years have kept him on the road practically without a break. Comedy insiders will tell you the road is where the real ones get sorted from the moment chasers, because the road does not care what you hosted in 1996. It cares whether you are funny at 9:45 on a Thursday in a secondary market, and he reliably is, which is why the calendar stays full with no nostalgia discount attached to his name. There is no reinvention here to narrate, and that is the story. Stand-up is the rare corner of entertainment where nobody can edit you, nobody can cancel your time slot, and the only algorithm is whether the room laughs. Where is he now? He is on stage most weekends and 25 years married, the golden era's smoothest host, still doing the 2 jobs that never stopped being true, comedy and home. Corinne Duffy. Everybody called her Duff, and for a stretch of the 90s, she was everywhere you looked. Corinne Duffy was a Revlon model, a beloved VJ with a screwball wit, and an actress landing studio comedies, including a memorable turn in Dumb and Dumber, a woman seemingly designed by the decade itself, gorgeous, funny, unbothered. Then in 1995, at the height of all of it, her own body turned on her. She was diagnosed with neurosarcoidosis, a rare inflammatory disease that attacked her brain and spine, and she has lived with it and with serious chronic pain every single day since. That is 30 years. Read that number again. What she has built on top of that sentence is one of the most quietly magnificent lives in this book. Duffy went and became a certified hospital chaplain. Real training, real credential. and she has served for years at the bedsides of people in their hardest hours, a woman in constant pain showing up to sit with other people in theirs. She has written funny, unsentimental, genuinely wise books about all of it: Model Patient, Backbone, Wise Up, titles that tell you exactly how much self-pity she permits herself, which is none. Her writing voice is the giveaway. She writes about spinal lesions the way other humorists write about airports, with timing, with fury converted to wit, with a flat refusal to be the saddest thing in her own paragraph. Medicine has its terms for what she carries. She has her own term, which is a life currently in progress. Thank you for asking. In a long interview published at the start of 2026, she talked about pain, faith, and usefulness with the lightness of someone who long ago stopped negotiating with her diagnosis and started out working it. Where is she now? She is a working chaplain and author in New York, 30 years into an incurable illness and more useful than most of the healthy. And if this book has a patron saint, she is probably it. Idalis DeLeon. For a stretch of the middle 90s, the channel's afternoons belonged to a Puerto Rican New Yorker with a megawatt smile who had already lived one whole career before the cameras found her. Idalis DeLeon had sung in the R&B group Seduction, toured, made records, and then became one of the network's signature VJs, warm and quick, the host who felt less like a broadcaster and more like your coolest cousin visiting from the Bronx. When the on-camera lane narrowed, as it always narrows, she did the smartest possible thing. She moved to the other side of the lens and monetized what she actually knew. Since 2008, she has run Idalis Media in Los Angeles, coaching hosts, training executives and talent to survive exactly the kind of on-camera scrutiny she lived through. And in recent years, she has been directing with an active slate of projects and developing her own stage play, Diamonds in the Waiting Room. There are famous names in this book who kept chasing the camera long after it stopped loving them back. Idalis chose the quieter, saner exit, teaching the next generation how to do the job, and the industry has kept her phone ringing for nearly 2 decades because of it. There is a specific justice in her chosen specialty, too. Nobody ever taught the 90s VJs how to do any of it, how to read a prompter while a crowd screams, how to rescue an interview going sideways, how to be a person and a brand in the same breath. She wrote the missing manual from memory, and she sells it now to an industry that finally understands it needs one. Where is she now? She is behind the camera in Los Angeles, running her own shop, directing her own work, the VJ who turned the job into a curriculum and never looked back. Simon Rex. His story is the full arc, the whole roller coaster, and it ends somewhere nobody predicted, so hold on. Simon Rex was a San Francisco kid turned model turned VJ in the middle 90s, hired young and gorgeous, and he rode the fame into acting, comedies, the Scary Movie franchise, and a side career as a deliberately absurd comedy rapper. And then the industry, in its casual way, was done with him. The roles dried up. The phone stopped. By his own frequent telling, he spent years in the wilderness, a former famous person in cheap rentals, the cautionary tale in progress that this genre usually files under whatever happened to. Except the story was not over. In 2021, the director Sean Baker cast him in a small independent film called Red Rocket, and Simon Rex delivered one of the most acclaimed performances of the year by anyone, winning the Independent Spirit Award for Best Lead Performance and forcing the entire industry to admit it had thrown away a real actor. Critics reached for words like revelation, which must be a strange word to read about yourself in midlife after 2 decades of being introduced as a punchline. He has been frank and funny about the wilderness years, the tiny rentals, the pride swallowed in gulps, which is why the current run lands less like luck and more like a debt the business finally decided to pay. The years since have been a working actor's dream in progress. The trucking dramato arrived in theaters in March of 2026. The comedy Operation Taco, Gary's the month before, indie films Americana and Magic Farm in 2025, and at the Cannes Market in May of 2026, a thriller called Don't Get Up, sold with Simon Rex attached as the lead, cameras rolling in November. Sit with the shape of that. The industry spent 15 years telling him he was finished, and he is now the lead the buyers want. Where is he now? He is on set, or about to be. The VJ who fell all the way down the mountain and climbed back up a harder face of it. And the view from where he stands is entirely earned. Steve Isaacs. Before there was ever a wannabe a VJ contest, there was Steve Isaacs, the original proof of concept. In 1991, the channel let the audience itself choose a host, and the audience chose a wry, long-haired music obsessive who looked like he had wandered in from the exact record store where you wished you worked. He held the chair for 2 years in the alternative gold rush, interviewing the grunge era at close range, the first fan the viewers ever promoted to the family. He then did what actual music obsessives do. He made music fronting bands through the 90s and eventually singing for the Panic Channel, a group he formed with members of Jane's Addiction, which is not a bad line on anyone's resume. The through line of his whole career is taste. The audience in 1991 did not vote for a face. It voted for the guy who plainly knew where the good stuff was, and 3 decades later the entertainment industry pays him for precisely the same instinct, at industrial scale, with better coffee. And when the music business finished being the music business, he took his creative instincts somewhere they would be fed. Today, Steve Isaacs is an executive vice president and creative lead at an entertainment marketing agency in Los Angeles, one of the people who designs how movies and shows introduce themselves to the world, which is, if you squint, the VJ job again, the art of the introduction, practiced at an industrial scale. Where is he now? He is running creative campaigns in Hollywood, the first viewer-chosen VJ, still doing what the audience originally hired him for, telling you what to watch next. Walking away on purpose. Stop and count something with us, because a pattern has been forming quietly since the second section, and it is about to get stronger. Kevin Seal is playing the organ at hockey games and raising his son, by every indication a deeply contented man. China Cantner traded the whole apparatus for a ministry in Pomona. Idalis de Leon moved behind the camera and built a business teaching others to survive in front of it. And in the next section, you will meet a woman who anchored the most important news desk in youth culture and left it, completely and permanently, for a camera that does not talk back. The industry has one word for people who leave, and the word is disappeared, as in whatever happened to, as in she just disappeared. Notice the assumption buried in the grammar. It assumes the screen is the world, and that stepping off of it is a kind of death. The people who actually did it report otherwise. What they describe is not disappearance but arrival at a workbench, a darkroom, a chapel, a kitchen at 6 in the evening with people who do not care what you used to host. The VJ job was intimacy at industrial volume, a million friendships running one direction. Some of the people who held it decided, sooner or later, that they wanted the handmade kind instead, the friendships that run both ways, the rooms where you are known rather than recognized. Recognition, it turns out, is the fast food of love. It fills you and it is not food. As you meet the rest of the names, keep a private tally of who chased the cameras and who chose the close-range life, and notice when we reach the end which group is doing better. It will not be close. The news desk. It sounds almost quaint now, but for about 20 years, a music video channel operated one of the most trusted news organizations in America, if you were under 25. MTV News was the serious minute on the silly channel, the desk that told the young country about elections and wars, and, on one terrible April afternoon in 1994, about the death of the voice of its generation, delivered by a man in reading glasses whose gravity in that moment is burned into millions of memories. The news desk hired real journalists, and the proof of that is what became of them, because when the desk itself was taken away, every single one of them kept being exactly what they had always been: reporters. It was a strange assignment they all shared, being the adults in a building dedicated to youth, delivering genuine news in the 60 seconds between a boy band premiere and a spring break promo. and they played it straight every single time, which is precisely why an entire generation still associates the phrase "you heard it here first" with their faces and nobody else's. Kurt Loder. He was the adult in the building, and he seemed to find the whole thing quietly hilarious. Kurt Loder came to the channel from Rolling Stone, where he had been a top editor and one of the most respected music journalists alive. And starting in the late 80s, he became the face and voice of MTV News, delivering the week in rock with a dry precision that flattered its young audience by refusing to talk down to it. And on April 8, 1994, it fell to Kurt Loder to break into programming and tell that audience that Kurt Cobain was gone. Ask anyone who was young that day. They can tell you where they were standing. It was the moment a music channel's news desk became, for its generation, what Cronkites had been for their parents. The wonderful news is that the byline never stopped. Kurt Loder turned 81 in May of 2026, a birthday marked with a party attended by old colleagues including Matt Pinfield and Chris Connolly. And he is still working, still filing on deadline, every single week. He writes a syndicated weekly film review column that was still publishing new pieces as this book went to air in July of 2026, and he has hosted his long-running program on SiriusXM besides. 81 years old and turning in copy every week, which is not a comeback and not a farewell tour, just a professional writer doing what professional writers do, which is die with a deadline pending. Many decades from now, we hope. Style is why it works. The Loder sentence, dry, exact, quietly lethal, has not aged a day, and reading him now is like discovering that the best teacher you ever had is still teaching. Same corner classroom, new students every fall, standards fully intact. Where is he now? He is at his desk on deadline, the most trusted voice the channel ever had, still telling you in perfect sentences what is worth your time. Tabitha Soren. She was 25 and asking presidents harder questions than the adults were. Tabitha Soren was the face of the channel's choose or lose political coverage in 1992, the year the youth vote became a national story, and she interviewed presidents, candidates, and world figures with a directness that made the legacy networks visibly nervous. For a stretch of the 90s, she was among the most recognizable journalists in the country, full stop, and the punchline aimed at her, that a music channel had no business at the conventions, aged about as badly as punchlines can age. Then at the top she walked, completely. Tabitha Soren left broadcasting, studied photography, and has spent the last 2.5 decades becoming a serious, collected, critically respected fine art photographer in the Bay Area. And this is not celebrity hobby photography. This is the real thing. In 2025, her project Surface Tension, images about the fingerprints and swipes we leave on the screens that deliver our news, had solo exhibitions in Deauville, London, and Paris, and her work hung in a major group exhibition in Bentonville into January of 2026. The woman who once delivered the news now makes art about the smudged glass we receive it through, which is the kind of career rhyme a novelist would reject as too neat. Notice, too, what the art world does not talk about when it talks about her, which is television. Her work gets hung and collected and reviewed on its own terms, the second career earned entirely inside the second room. And for someone who was once among the most recognizable faces in the country, anonymity on merit may be the rarest prize this book has to offer. Where is she now? She is in the darkroom and the gallery, the news desk's brightest star turned genuine artist, the one who walked away on purpose and by every visible measure walked toward something. John Norris. The silver hair arrived early and became a trademark, and the enthusiasm never left, which is the whole man in one sentence. John Norris logged more years at the news desk than nearly anyone, from the late 80s deep into the 2000s, the correspondent who seemed to have personally interviewed every band you ever loved, always with the delighted intensity of a fan who could not believe this counted as work. He is still on the beat. Norris works today as a freelance music journalist, his byline turning up at Stereogum, Billboard, and Paper, still interviewing artists a third his age about scenes half his age, still plainly in love with the assignment. And in May of 2026, he sat down alongside Kurt Loder and Tabitha Soren for a long podcast conversation about the life and death of MTV News itself. Three veterans of the desk telling the story of the newsroom that raised a generation. A conversation that doubled as a reunion and a wake. He remains the era's great enthusiast, the man for whom the next band never stopped being the best part of the job. And there are working musicians today, half his age, who privately measure their arrival by whether John Norris wanted the interview. Where is he now? He is on deadline somewhere between a club show and a phone interview, the lifer of the news desk, still filing from the front row of whatever is next. Serena Alchel. She anchored the desk through the TRL boom, the composed presence explaining the mosh pit years to the country, and she did it with a polish that made her next move feel inevitable. Serena Alchel left the youth beat and grew up on camera in the most literal way available, becoming a contributing correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning, the gentlest, most beloved news magazine in American television, where she has been filing since 2013. And she is filing still, with segments airing through the summer of 2026, stories about art, culture, food, and the graceful odd corners of American life, delivered to an audience drinking coffee in the exact living rooms where her original audience's parents once complained about the channel she came from. There is a neat completeness in that. The woman who once explained Woodstock 99 to teenagers now explains glass-blowing and jazz archives to their parents, and the skill was always the same skill, curiosity with good manners. Longevity in that chair is not handed out either. The Sunday morning audience is the most loyal and least fooled in broadcast television, and she has held its trust for more than a decade by doing exactly what the news desk taught her first, the homework. Where is she now? She is on your television on Sunday mornings, a network correspondent of long standing, the news desk alum who made the softest possible landing and stuck it. Sachin Pak. She broke a barrier most viewers did not even clock at the time, which is how the best barrier breaking often works. Sachin Pak joined the news desk in the early 2000s as the channel's first Korean-American news correspondent, and for years she was one of its warmest and most substantive presences, reporting on everything from campaigns to culture with a groundedness the format did not always deserve. Her second act has been a delight. She co-hosts Add to Cart, a long-running podcast with the comedian Kulap Vilaysack that turns consumerism into confession, part shopping show, part group therapy, with new work rolling out as recently as a spin-off series in the fall of 2025. And in the fact of this section that will make you grin, she is still, to this day, the narrator of MTV Cribs, the voice welcoming you into celebrity kitchens a full generation after she first did it. Somewhere in America right now a rerun is playing and Sachin Pak is saying the words about a Shark Tank in a living room. The podcast, meanwhile, has become one of those shows listeners describe as a friendship they get to eavesdrop on. Two funny women telling the truth about wanting things, which returns her by the scenic route to the original VJ job description, keeping people company on purpose. Where is she now? She is in your podcast feed every week, and forever in the Cribs voiceover booth, the correspondent who turned curiosity about how we live into an entire career. Gideon Yago. He was the kid at the desk when the towers fell, and the assignment of explaining an unexplainable decade to the young country fell substantially on him. Gideon Yago was in his early 20s when he became a news desk correspondent, and he did serious work in serious places, reporting from the Iraq War era with a gravity that made him one of the faces of the desk's final great chapter, the proof that the channel's news operation was, to the very end, real. He left the anchor chair and became what most good correspondents secretly are, a writer. Yago is a working television writer in Los Angeles, with credits on some of the most respected drama of the last decade, The Newsroom, Quantico, The Mosquito Coast, an entire second career built in the writer's rooms where television's serious sentences actually get made. He keeps a low public profile and lets the credits talk. And notice where his old beat actually went, because it went with him. The serious young audience that once got its news from a music channel gets its civic imagination from prestige drama now, and one of the people writing that drama is the correspondent who knew that audience best, still on the same assignment in a different font. Where is he now? He is at a keyboard in Los Angeles, a former war correspondent for a music channel who became a dramatist, and the kid from the desk turned out to be a lifer with words. Sway Calloway. And then there is the one who became an institution. Sway Calloway came up through Oakland hip-hop radio, already a legend of the freestyle era before the channel ever hired him. And as a news desk correspondent, he became the culture's designated interviewer, the man rappers actually answered honestly. The bandana became a trademark. The respect became universal. Today, Sway may hold the strongest hand of anyone in this book. His daily program, Sway in the Morning, is 14 years deep on Shade 45 and rolling. And in 2026, he moved the show's home base to Los Angeles, going bi-coastal without missing a morning. Listeners of this series have technically already met his co-host, because Heather B. of the first Real World cast holds down the microphone beside him, 2 chapters of this whole project sharing one studio. In April of 2026, he launched something bigger, the SKT Network, a streaming app he co-founded with his longtime partner DJ King Tech, aiming to be a global platform for hip-hop culture, and the National Radio Hall of Fame has already inducted him. From correspondent to conglomerate without a single scandal on the way, on the strength of one repeated act, taking the culture seriously when it mattered. His freestyle gauntlet, the 5 Fingers of Death, has become a rite of passage with the weight of an institution. A segment artists genuinely prepare for, because the culture keeps score in his studio in a way no chart can, and everyone knows it. Where is he now? He is on the air every morning and building his own network besides, the news desk kid who became hip-hop radio's sitting institution, and year 14 is just a number on the way to 30. The archive that vanished. Here is a strange and heavy fact, and we will hand it to you straight. MTV News, the desk you just walked through, was shut down in May of 2023, a cost-cutting casualty after nearly 4 decades. That part, sad as it is ordinary corporate weather. What happened next is not. In June of 2024, the parent company deleted the MTV News website in its entirety. Roughly 20 years of articles, interviews, and reporting. The written record of youth culture from the late 90s onward, gone from the internet in an afternoon. Writers who had spent decades on that beat woke up to find their life's work returning error messages. The record itself vanished. Sit with what that means for a book like this one. We spend these episodes asking where the people went, on the comfortable assumption that the work at least stays put. It does not. The videos moved to a platform. The platform changed owners. The owners did the math. An era that believed itself thoroughly documented turned out to be written in chalk, and the rain came in one budget cycle, which is why the people in this section matter more, not less, than they did before the deletion. Loader still filing at 81, Nora still interviewing, Soren literally photographing the surfaces the news slides across, Sway building an archive of the culture in real time. When the record vanishes, the witnesses are the record. The desk is gone, the links are dead, and the only place that newsroom still fully exists is in the people who staffed it, which you may notice is more or less the thesis of this entire series, arriving early and uninvited like all the best news does. The last video stars. Sunday nights at midnight, a generation of misfit kids kept a secret appointment. 120 minutes was the channel's late-night church of the underground. 2 hours of music too strange for daylight. And for the faithful, it was not a show, it was a lifeline, proof that somewhere out there other people also felt like this. Through the 90s, the church got bigger. The underground briefly became the entire mainstream. And by decade's end, the channel was staging talent searches for its own hosts and building a glass studio above Times Square. This section belongs to the hosts of that whole last golden run, the video era's closing shift, and it holds the most loss in this book and the most courage, usually in the same paragraphs. We ask for your gentleness here. One of these goodbyes is only days old. Dave Kendall. Every Sunday at midnight, a British voice welcomed America's strange kids home. Dave Kendall did not just host 120 Minutes. He created it, building the channel's alternative showcase in the late 80s and fronting it into 1992, and his taste became a generation's map. It was Kendall's show that gave countless future obsessions their first national airing, and in 1991, it debuted a video by a scruffy trio from Aberdeen, Washington called Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is a little like being the doorman who waved the 20th century through. He treated the underground as news that mattered, and the kids who stayed up for him never forgot the respect. Watch old tape of the show now, and what strikes you is the seriousness. No smirk, no zoo crew antics, just a broadcaster treating feedback-drenched singles from nowhere towns like dispatches that deserved context. Because to the kids listening in the dark, that is exactly what they were. His later life was its own quiet adventure, and a genuinely admirable one. Kendall moved to Bangkok and became a working journalist and columnist there. And in recent years, he had devoted himself to environmental advocacy in Thailand and Indonesia, using his platform for rivers and forests instead of record releases. The curator of the underground turned steward of the actual earth. And then in the middle of July 2026, as this very book was being finished, came the news nobody was ready for. Dave Kendall died at 68. The announcement came from his old colleague and successor Matt Pinfield, whom you are about to meet, and the grief across the alternative generation was immediate and enormous. A Sunday midnight congregation suddenly bereaved. The loss is days old as you hear this, and we will not pretend to have perspective on it yet. We will just say thank you. Where is he now? He is in every record collection that started with his show, the man who opened the door and let the strange kids in. In memoriam, Dave Kendall, gone in July of 2026 and gone far too soon. Louis Largent. The Church of Sunday Midnight had more than one pastor, and this one shaped the 90s twice, from both sides of the desk. Louis Largent came out of Lowe's Angels Alternative Radio, where he had been a taste-making force at the legendary KROQ, and in the middle 90s he took over 120 Minutes, guiding the faithful through the after-grunge landscape with a curator's ear and a low-key warmth the format never got enough credit for. Then he moved to the other side of the business and kept shaping it. As a music executive at Island Def Jam, Largent signed and championed bands, most famously Sum 41, which means the pop-punk explosion of the 2000s runs partly through his desk. Later in life, he stepped back from the industry altogether and earned a graduate degree in writing from Sarah Lawrence, a music lifer quietly becoming a student again in middle age, which tells you something lovely about his curiosity. It is a rare road tastemaker to executive to student, and it traces a single consistent instinct, which was that the music always mattered more to him than whichever seat he happened to be holding near it. Louis Largent died on February 20, 2023 at 58 after a long illness, and the tributes from artists and radio people said the same essential thing, that he was one of the good ones, the rare gatekeeper who used the gate to let people in. Where is he now? He is in the DNA of two eras of loud American music, the signal and the static, remembered with gratitude on both coasts. In memoriam, Louis Largent, gone in the winter of 2023. Matt Pinfield. Nobody ever knew more. That was the entire premise of Matt Pinfield, the shaved head and glasses that took over 120 Minutes in the middle 90s. A man who had absorbed the complete history of rock and roll at the molecular level, and who delivered it with such unguarded enthusiasm that the bands he interviewed routinely ended up interviewing him. He was the fan elevated to the chair, the walking proof that loving music hard enough could be a career, and everyone from arena headliners to garage bands treated him as family because he was. He has been equally unguarded about the hard parts. A lifelong battle with addiction he chronicled in his memoir, All These Things That I've Done, and a recovery he has carried publicly for years. Then came the test nobody saw coming. In early January of 2025, Matt Pinfield suffered a massive stroke. For roughly 2 months he was unresponsive, and his family was told he might not survive, and the music world held its breath and began quietly composing its goodbyes. It filed them all unread. In March of 2025, he came back to consciousness and told the world, in essence, that he was alive and grateful and coming back, and then he actually did it. By May, he was on stage hosting Green Day's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony. By the middle of 2025, he was back on Daily Low's Angels Radio and his syndicated show. And in January of 2026, he marked the anniversary of the stroke on the air. And as of this very month, July of 2026, he is still there, doing a daily shift, still the guy who knows everything. Recovery from addiction, he has often said in one form or another, taught him how to survive hard days one at a time. And the stroke recovery ran on the same engine, which means his 2 great comebacks were really one long practice, decades in the making, paying off when it counted most. It was Pinfield this month who had the heavy duty of announcing Dave Kendall's death to the world, the student delivering the eulogy news for his teacher, which is the kind of full circle nobody wants and only the strong can carry. Where is he now? He is on the radio today, back from the very edge, the encyclopedia that refused to close, and the whole music world is still cheering. Jesse Camp. In 1998, the channel held a talent contest to find its next VJ, and the audience elected a 19-year-old lightning storm. Jesse Camp was a gangly, raspy, joyfully chaotic street kid persona in thrift store glam. And for one bright moment, he was the most famous new face in America, the winner of Wanna Be a VJ, the viewer's own candidate storming the palace. He got a record deal, made a glam album with legendary guests, and burned across the channel like a comet, and like a comet, he was not built to stay. The persona, it should be said, was never really a costume, which was the charm of him and the risk of him all at once. The audience chose the unpolished option precisely because it was unpolished, and the machine that elected him was never built to protect what it had elected. The years after were quieter and sometimes genuinely hard, and we will tell them the way his story deserves, gently. He stepped away from television, and in the summer of 2018 there was a frightening stretch when his family reported him missing, and a few days later he was found safe, a scare that made national news and then mercifully ended well. What has emerged since is a picture of a man living life entirely on his own terms, mostly out of view, still making music, surfacing warmly when it counts, including a reunion with old friend Fred Durst at a movie premiere party at the end of 2024 that delighted the internet, and performing here and there with musician friends. On his own page, he bills himself these days as an OG MTV VJ and sustainable seafood magnate, which suggests the humor, at least, never went anywhere. Where is he now? He is living quietly by his own design, safe, still musical, still entirely himself, and the audience that voted for him once would, on the evidence, vote for him again. Dave Holmes. He lost the contest and won everything after it. Dave Holmes was the other finalist in Wanna Be a VJ, the funny, music-drenched everyman the internet would have chosen if the internet had existed properly yet. And when the audience picked the lightning storm instead, the channel did the smartest thing in its history and hired the runner-up anyway. Holmes became one of the network's most durable and beloved hosts precisely because he was what he appeared to be, the smartest fan in the room. Nobody from the era has aged better into the word writer. Dave Holmes is an editor-at-large for Esquire, where his essays and columns were still landing as of June 2026. He has hosted his own SiriusXM show for years, and he wrote a warm, wickedly funny memoir called Party of One about growing up gay and Midwestern and music-obsessed, and eventually finding out that the thing that made him feel alone was the thing the culture wanted most. It is the rare show business memoir that reads like actual literature, because it was written by an actual writer, and it converted his origin story, losing a popularity contest on national television, into one of the era's warmest running jokes, told best and most gladly by the man it happened to. In 2025, he turned the expertise fully inward and hosted a podcast documentary about the rise and fall of his old employer, called Who Killed the Video Star, which makes him both witness and coroner. Where is he now? He is writing, hosting, and narrating the history he lived, the runner-up who turned second place into the longest and possibly happiest career of the entire TRL era. Ananda Lewis. Some people are so luminous on camera that the medium seems invented for them. Ananda Lewis arrived at the channel in the late 90s, already a star of the acclaimed Teen Forum Teen Summit, and she became one of the defining VJ presences of the TRL years, host of the Hot Zone, the interviewer Teen America actually trusted, named by magazines as among the most beautiful people alive, and more to the point, one of the warmest. She got her own daytime talk show. The whole broadcast world seemed to be waiting for her. What came instead was a private fight she eventually chose to make public, on her own terms for other people's sake. Ananda was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer in 2019. She spoke honestly about her treatment path, including her initial decision to pursue alternatives before surgery, a choice she reflected on candidly as the illness progressed, and we will honor her the way she asked to be heard, without judgment and with her message intact, because she turned her final years into a campaign. She urged women over and over in interviews and on camera to get their mammograms, to not delay, to not repeat her hesitation, to catch it early. That was her closing argument to the world, delivered while she was carrying the weight of it herself, which is a kind of bravery that needs no embellishment. Ananda Lewis died on June 11, 2025 at 52, and the grief ran from her old audience to the breast cancer community, where advocacy organizations publicly mourned her as one of their own. The outpouring said the quiet part plainly, that for a generation of viewers, and especially for young Black women who saw themselves reflected in that window with intelligence and glamour and authority all at once, she was never just a host. She was a proof of possibility, arriving every afternoon at 3:30. Where is she now? She is in every early appointment somebody books because she asked them to, which is exactly the legacy she chose. In memoriam, Ananda Lewis, gone in June of 2025. Get the screening. She would want that sentence here. DJ Scribble. Every afternoon party needs somebody actually running the music, and for the TRL era that somebody wore headphones and a grin. DJ Scribble, born Scott Ialachi, was the channel's resident turntablist across the late 90s and early 2000s, the working DJ from Queens who scratched the era's soundtrack live while the countdown roared, a craftsman embedded in the circus. The craft is precisely why he never needed a comeback, because the work never stopped. Scribble has spent the decades since as a globally working DJ and producer, including Las Vegas residencies, and his recent calendar tells you everything about his standing. In 2025, he toured American military bases across the Pacific, playing for service members in Okinawa, Korea, and Japan. And in April of 2026, he headlined a spring break party cruise aboard one of the biggest ships in the world, sharing the bill with Chris Kirkpatrick of NSYNC and Dan Cordes, a floating TRL reunion with a cocktail program. The gig list is the whole resume, and the resume keeps saying the same thing at every stop, which is that when a room absolutely has to move on a base or a boat or a Vegas floor, somebody books the professional. Where is he now? He is behind the decks somewhere on land or sea, the era's house DJ still gainfully, joyfully employed. Proof that if you are the one with an actual skill when the show ends, the party simply relocates. Carson Daly. He was the captain of the whole Times Square operation, and here is the fact he waited 20 years to tell you. Carson Daly was the comm center of TRL, the host holding the rail while a street full of screaming teenagers shook the glass. The most envied job in television for young America. And while he was doing it, he was quietly having panic attacks, including his very first one live in that studio, holding the microphone, telling nobody at all. He told everybody eventually, and it may be the most important thing he ever did on camera. Dolly went on to the biggest mainstream career of any VJ ever, full stop. He has co-hosted the Today Show for years and hosted The Voice since its first episode, more than 520 episodes, and counting as of its 29th season in 2026. Two of the biggest jobs in American broadcasting held simultaneously, decade after decade. And since going public in 2018 with his generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder, he has become one of television's steadiest mental health advocates, talking about therapy and coping the same way he once talked about countdowns, casually in front of millions, so that some kid gripping a microphone or a steering wheel somewhere knows the feeling has a name and a treatment. The arithmetic of that influence deserves a sentence. His current shows put him in front of more Americans in a week than the old countdown reached in a season, and he has spent that reach repeatedly and deliberately on the least glamorous message in entertainment, which is that the man with the dream job needed help and asked for it, and is glad he did. Where is he now? He is on your television roughly every day of the week, the TRL captain who won the whole industry, and the bravest thing in the glass window turned out to be the thing nobody could see. The ones the cameras could not save, and the ones who saved themselves. Look back down this section, because it teaches something the happy chapters cannot. The VJ job was, at bottom, emotional work. These were people paid to hold a generation's feelings, to introduce the song you cried to stand between the audience and its own heart and make the handoff graceful, and it turns out you can do that job beautifully while your own heart is in real trouble. Carson Daly held the rail of the loudest show on television mid-panic attack. Matt Pinfield knew everything about every record except how to save himself, until he learned that too in public twice. Ricky Ratchman is on a stage right now, this summer, saying the words addiction and jail and bankruptcy into a microphone on purpose. China Cantner turned the wreckage into a ministry. Jesse Camp scared the whole country for a week in 2018 and then chose a smaller, safer, truer life. Dr. Dre lost his sight and half a leg and kept his light, and now spends it warning others down a gentler road. Notice what every rescue in this book has in common. Not one of them happened on camera. The cameras made these people famous, and the cameras were useless in the exact hours it mattered, because the saving all happened in the unbroadcast places, hospital rooms, meetings in church basements, kitchens at midnight, the long, unglamorous mornings of getting well. The audience loved them enormously, and the love could not reach them there. Only the closer kind could, family, friends, doctors, faith, the telephone numbers that are not request lines. Hold that gently, because it is not a sad thought. It is the opposite. Every one of these people eventually found the room where the real help was and walked into it, and that walk off camera unapplauded is the bravest footage in this book, and it does not exist, and it never needed to. The Times Square window. At the end of the 90s, the channel built a studio with a window, and the window became the most famous piece of glass in America. Total Request live broadcast every afternoon from above Times Square, and the street below became a pilgrimage site. Thousands of teenagers with poster board and permanent markers screaming up at a building, begging the window to notice them. The hosts of that show held the last great version of the VJ job, the loudest and most public version, live television with a mob scene attached. And when the window finally went dark, they scattered into some of the most interesting lives in this entire book: a farm, a writer's room, an empire, and a meditation cushion outside Amsterdam. Picture the scene at its peak, because there has never been anything like it since. 1515 Broadway, mid-afternoon, 100 teenagers deep on the sidewalk, poster board and glitter pens, chants breaking out like weather, and upstairs, behind the glass, a handful of hosts in their 20s running a live national broadcast over the roar. Presidents have walked into quieter rooms. That was the office. That was Tuesday. Damien Fahey. Somebody had to follow Carson Daly, which is the broadcasting equivalent of being the guy who bats after the home run. And the kid from Massachusetts did it with a grin. Damien Fahey took over TRL hosting duties in the 2000s and held the window through the era's back half. Young, quick, likable, running the loudest afternoon on television like he had been born on it. Then he did the quietest, smartest pivot in the section. He became a comedy writer, and not as a vanity credit. Damien Fahey has spent roughly a decade on the writing staff of Family Guy, rising to co-executive producer, and he voices a recurring character, Corey, across more than 80 episodes, which means the man who once introduced boy bands to screaming crowds now writes cutaway gags for one of the longest-running comedies in television history. He also kept a hand on the radio dial, spinning as a DJ on a Los Angeles adult hit station, and he was podcasting away as recently as June of 2026. His is the good life nobody makes headlines about, a working writer with a steady gig, a famous past, and no visible interest in relitigating it. Comedy writing rooms are famously indifferent to past celebrity, which is exactly why his lasting in one matters. Nobody survives a decade on a show like that as a mascot. You survive because the jokes hold up in a room full of professionals with no memory of your window, and his evidently do. Where is he now? He is in a writer's room in Los Angeles making a cartoon town laugh, the last TRL captain, happily and permanently off camera. Vanessa Lashley. She went from the pageant stage to the window to the front of her own police procedural, which is a road nobody had walked before her. Vanessa Lashley, then Vanessa Manillo, was a Miss Teen USA who became one of TRL's defining later hosts, and she spent the decades after building a real acting career, capped by the biggest role of her life, the lead of NCIS Hawaii, boss of her own network drama franchise. Then came the whiplash year, and she has been refreshingly honest about it. In April of 2024, the network canceled NCIS Hawaii after 3 seasons, a decision she said flatly left her blindsided and gutted, and by that August, the family had packed up and left the islands. Here is the thing about her, though. She was never holding just one job. She and her husband Nick Lachey have hosted Love is Blind, one of the biggest reality franchises on Earth since its beginning. And in May of 2026, the show was renewed for its 11th season, set in Boston, premiering in the fall with the Lasheys confirmed and back at the altar where they have stood the whole time. The marriage itself remains the quiet cornerstone, Nick and Vanessa, together since the TRL orbit days and married since 2011, 3 kids, still co-workers, still visibly a team. The franchise math is remarkable on its own. Love is Blind became one of the defining social experiments of the streaming era, argued about in every group chat in the country. And its one constant, through every season and every discourse cycle, has been the couple at the front of the room. 2 music television kids who somehow make the strangest format on earth feel domestic. Where is she now? She is between a cancellation and a renewal, which is to say, working. A host and actress with 3 kids, and one of the most durable marriages the music television world ever produced. And The Blind Side did not knock her over. La Anthony. She came to the window from radio, and you could tell, because nothing about live television ever scared her. La Anthony, then Lala Vasquez, had been a teenage radio personality before she became one of TRL's essential hosts, the one with actual broadcasting muscle under the charm. And when the show ended, she executed the most methodical empire build of any VJ ever. Acting, producing, best-selling books, beauty ventures, a genuine second life as one of the culture's most connected personalities. The last year shows both sides of the ledger, which is why she belongs near the end of this book. The star's drama BMF, where she held a major role across its whole run, was canceled in the fall of 2025 after 4 seasons, the kind of ending that used to define a performer's next few years. It defined roughly 2 weeks of hers. Within a month, she had signed with a major management company. By spring, Forbes was profiling her as a business. In May of 2026, she hosted Vogue's Met Gala livestream for the 6th consecutive year, the red carpet's unofficial mayor, and her development slate rolled on, including a comedy project called Group Chat and a beauty collaboration. Add the through line that she remains one of the most beloved interviews in hip-hop culture, trusted the way the greats of this book were always trusted, still able to put a nervous superstar at ease in 90 seconds flat, which is pure TRL training, and the reason the culture's biggest names keep choosing her rooms for their softest landings. Where is she now? She is everywhere on purpose, a canceled show in the rear view and an empire in the windshield, the TRL host who understood earliest that the countdown was never the business. She was. Aquadius. Of everyone who ever held a microphone in the window, he was the gentlest interviewer, and it turned out to be a clue. Quadius Philippe was TRL's warm center in the 2000s. The host artists opened up to, and his sit-down with a young Kanye West became part of the acclaimed Genius documentary years later, prompting a major magazine to revisit, in early 2026, how much of that era's truth got captured because Quadius asked questions like he actually wanted the answers. His present tense is the biggest reinvention in this book, and we are going to tell it straight because it deserves that. After television, he built a media coaching business, teaching artists and executives to communicate, and the coaching kept deepening until it became something else entirely. Today, Quadius lives near Amsterdam and works as a sound healing facilitator, leading retreats through his sound sanctuary practice, guiding people through rest and repair with vibration and voice, work he describes in his own unhurried terms. And yes, that is a long way from Times Square, and no, he does not seem to miss the noise. He has been open about the road there, including a divorce. He speaks of himself plainly as part of what remade him. The magazine retrospective this year made the point his whole career keeps making, that the interviews people still study from the TRL era were the ones where the interviewer nearly disappeared, where a question was a door held open rather than a performance, and that particular gift, it turns out, transfers to any room, including very quiet ones. It would be easy to play his story for a smirk, and this book declines. The man spent the TRL years helping artists be heard and spends these days helping ordinary people listen, to themselves mostly, which may be the most consistent career arc in the entire lineup. Where is he now? He is in a quiet room outside Amsterdam with a gong and a circle of strangers becoming less like strangers, the window's warmest voice, still doing the same job, at a volume the old show never tried. Hilary Burton Morgan. She was a college kid who talked her way into the window, and the window turned out to be the smaller part of the story. Hilary Burton was one of TRL's brightest hosts before she became a television star in her own right on One Tree Hill, nearly a decade as one of teen drama's defining faces. And then, in the era's most storybook turn, she married the actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan and traded the whole circus for a working farm in upstate New York. The farm is not a metaphor. Mischief Farm is an actual farm with actual animals, where the couple has raised their 2 kids and built one of the entertainment world's most grounded family operations, alongside a local candy shop and a habit of showing up for their small town like neighbors instead of celebrities. Their public life runs on a kind of cheerful stubbornness about the arrangement, the insistence that the farm is not a retreat from the industry, but a correction of it, proof that you can keep the work you love and lose the machinery you never did. The work rolls on her own terms. Her documentary series True Crime Story launched its 3rd season in February of 2026, and in March of 2026 came the announcement that AMC has a gothic drama called The New Gothic in development with her, a project literally built around her lifelong love of ghost stories. One newsier note, handled the way she handled it, with care. In the summer of 2024, she stepped back from the One Tree Hill Rewatch podcast she had co-founded, sharing candidly that revisiting the hardest parts of that old workplace had become too heavy to keep carrying, a boundary drawn in public with grace, and we will leave it exactly there. Where is she now? She is on a farm in the Hudson Valley with her family, a development deal, and a docuseries. The TRL kid who ended up with the life everyone in the window was secretly screaming for. Susie Castillo. She held 2 crowns before she held the microphone. Susie Castillo won Miss USA in 2003, a Massachusetts kid of Puerto Rican and Dominican roots, and then became a VJ in the channel's later era, part of the generation that carried the job through its final broadcast years, bright, bilingual, and built for live television. She belongs to the cohort that inherited the chair in its twilight and did the work honorably anyway, keeping the light on in the window while the industry quietly moved the furniture out of the building behind them. And there is a professionalism in that which deserves more credit than twilight shifts ever get. Her present chapter is the kind of steady, sane working life this business rarely advertises. She has a recurring role as Principal Ramirez on Nickelodeon's The Really Loud House, on the air since 2022. She signed with a modeling agency again in 2025, back in front of the stills cameras where she started. And in early 2026, she was speaking to school kids about the road from a working-class childhood to a crown to a career, which is exactly the assembly you would want your kid to sit through. No scandal, no reinvention arc, no wilderness years. Just a professional working. Where is she now? She is on a kids' show your children may already watch, modeling again and telling students how she did it. The last era's beauty queen turned VJ, landed softly and standing up straight. The day the music video died. Here is how the era officially ended, and the poetry of the date is almost too much. On December 31, 2025, New Year's Eve, at the stroke of the year, the company that owns it all switched off the last of the music-only channels across the United Kingdom, Europe, Australia, and Brazil. MTV Music, MTV 80s, MTV 90s, Club MTV, MTV Live, Dark, all of them all at once. The flagship channel survives, full of reality shows, and this book will not pretend otherwise. But the channels whose entire job was playing music videos, the direct descendants of that midnight rocket in 1981, signed off forever while the fireworks were still in the air. 44 years, 4 months, and 30 days after a voice said, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," somebody, somewhere in a control room, executed the last cue. If you grew up inside this book, you are allowed a moment about that. The reasonable people will tell you nothing really died, that the videos all live on your phone, that the format simply moved, and the reasonable people are right in the way reasonable people always are, which is completely and uselessly. Because the channel was never really about access to videos. It was about somebody on the other end. A face that came on between the songs and said, in 100 different ways, you are not just watching this, we are watching this. That is the thing the algorithm never replaced because it cannot. The feed knows what you like. It will never know what you are going through. For that, the whole time it took a person, and this book has just spent 2 hours telling you what became of those people, which means the obituary for the format is also, conveniently, the argument for them. The videos survived just fine. It was the company we lost. And if you want the perfect epitaph, the era wrote it herself decades early in the very first song the channel ever played. Video killed the radio star. The song joked in 1981 at 1 minute past midnight. It turned out to have things exactly backward. Video did not kill the radio star. Video hired several dozen of them, worked them without a manual for 20 years, and then quietly went out of business. And the radio stars, as this book has now demonstrated at length, buried it, said something kind at the service, and went back to doing their shows. What we talk about when we ask where they are now. So what did we actually learn, walking the whole hallway, from a bar in New Jersey in 1981, to a control room going dark on New Year's Eve? Start with the finding that surprised us most. They are still on the air, not some of them, most of them. Blackwood, Goodman, Hunter, Quinn, Downtown, Julie Brown, Ed Lover, Sway, Pinfield, Heather B's Morning Partner, and Martha's 40 stations, and Carson Dolly on 2 networks at once. An entire generation of video hosts who, when the video part evaporated, revealed what the job had secretly been the whole time. Radio. The pictures were always the novelty. The talking to you was the work, and talking to you, it turns out, does not age. The technology that made them famous barely lasted 2 decades. The skill underneath it has now lasted 5 and counting, which suggests the machines were never the story. The voices were. Then there is the harder lesson, the one the middle of this book kept teaching. The job of holding a generation's feelings is real work, and it sends a bill. The panic attack in the glass window, the stroke at the microphone, the addictions fought in public and the recoveries built in private, the eyesight and the leg that a disease took from the funniest man in the morning slot. This book carried 4 goodbyes, a gentleman from the first night, 2 pastors of the Sunday midnight church, and a bright, generous woman who spent her last strength telling other women to get screened earlier than she did. And if even one listener books that appointment because her story sat in this chapter, then this book has done more than nostalgia has any right to do. And finally, the quiet headline. The ones who flourished were almost never the ones who clung to the spotlight. They were the ones who found the load-bearing thing beneath it, the craft, the faith, the family, the shift, and stood on that. The woodworker at the hockey organ, the minister in Pomona, the chaplain with the incurable diagnosis and the unbeatable attitude, the photographer in the gallery, the farmer in the Hudson Valley, the sound healer outside Amsterdam, the writers in their rooms and the executives at their desks and the road comics counting the house. Fame for every single soul in this book was weather. It rained on all of them gorgeously for a while, and then it moved on, and the question this series keeps asking, where are they now, always turns out to have the same deep answer underneath the particulars. They are wherever they were already standing when the rain stopped. Choose your ground accordingly. A word for the listener. So here is what we would ask of you, now that you have taken this walk. The next time one of these names drifts across your screen, a countdown clip, an anniversary, an obituary, remember that the person on the other end of that memory was doing something stranger and kinder than it looked. They were keeping you company. At scale, imperfectly, through a camera, but truly. Somewhere in your past, there was an afternoon that went badly, a bedroom with the door closed, a bus ride, a winter, and one of these voices was there, playing the next song, promising without ever quite saying it that the next song was coming. That was a service. Nobody called it one at the time. Call it one now. Be gentle with the ones who stumbled because you have heard tonight what the stumbling cost them. Cheer the comebacks properly. Pinfield back on the air ought to make you a little braver about your own bad year. Say a quiet thank you for JJ and Lewis and Dave and Ananda and do the thing she asked. Book the screening. Remind somebody you love to book theirs. While you are at it, notice how many of these people are one radio dial away from you right now. That is the open secret of this episode. This is not a book about vanished people. Most of them never left, they just moved down the dial, and the reunion is available any weekday morning for the price of turning something on. Nostalgia usually asks you to visit a grave. This particular nostalgia mostly asks you to visit a broadcast schedule, which, as fates go for a generation of faces, is about the happiest ending the entertainment industry has ever accidentally produced. And maybe take the larger lesson home, because it was never really about television. Every one of us now runs a little channel of our own, curating, broadcasting, wondering if anyone is watching. The people in this book did it first, with worse contracts and no rehearsal, and the ones who came through whole all discovered the same thing. The channel is not the life. The life is the part that happens at close range, off the air, in rooms where you are known rather than recognized. Build that the way the wise ones in this book built it, and the rest is just programming. Here is the last thing, and then we will let you go. Somewhere tonight, a kid is talking into a phone camera about the music she loves, unpolished, overlit, completely sincere, and 100 people are listening, and then 1,000. She has no idea what she is walking into, the reach, the love, the strange bill that arrives later, and she does not know that the job she is inventing for herself was invented once before, at 1 minute past midnight in the summer of 1981, by 5 people in a studio nobody could see, who also had no idea. Wish her well. Wish her a Ruddy or a JJ, an elder who has seen it all and tells her the truth. And when her wave finally rolls back, decades from now, and somebody sits down to ask whatever became of her, may the answer be the one the best people in this book earned. She is fine. She found the ground under the spotlight. She is still talking to us, and we are still listening. Thank you for taking this walk back with us. Go find someone you watched the countdown with and argue about the best video of all time. You are both right, whatever you pick. We will see you on the next one. Books by Barron, Where Are They Now? A note on respect and language. This program was made in the belief that the people it profiles are owed dignity, especially the ones whose stories turned hard. Where a life involved addiction, illness, legal trouble, grief, or loss, we have tried to name the truth without wallowing in it. We did not include a subject in order to expose them, and we deliberately left out details that would serve only to sensationalize a person's worst moments. Contested matters are described as contested, private matters are left private, and where we could not verify something, we left it out rather than guess. Several of the losses in this book are recent, and one is very recent indeed, and we have tried to write those passages the way you would want a stranger to write about someone you loved. If we fell short of that standard anywhere, the fault is ours, and we welcome the correction. A note on sources. Everything in this book is drawn from the public record. Published interviews, contemporaneous news reporting and obituaries, broadcast footage, official announcements, and statements the subjects made themselves. Present-day status for each subject was checked against current reporting rather than memory, and then checked again in an independent second pass, because the whole point of asking where they are now is to answer it accurately, and lives change faster than reputations do. Where accounts differed, we favored the most reliable and most recent, and where a claim could not be confirmed by more than one source, we either softened it to what could be verified or left it out. No private information was used, and nothing was invented. About the Where Are They Now series. Where Are They Now is a nostalgia retrospective series from Books by Barron that follows the people who once lived on our screens and asks the question time always leaves behind. What happened to them next? Each episode profiles a category of once famous people and tells, person by person, where they are now, the good landings and the hard roads and the quiet second acts, built entirely from the public record and narrated with warmth and respect. If this one meant something to you, there are more, and there is another on the way. Disclosure. This program is an independent work of biography and commentary produced by Books by Barron and Barron Darby. It is built entirely from publicly available information. It is not authorized, endorsed by, or affiliated with any of the individuals profiled, or their families, estates, representatives, studios, networks, or production companies, including MTV, Paramount, SiriusXM, iHeartMedia, Odyssey, CBS, NBC, Fox, AMC, Starz, Nickelodeon, Netflix, or any other organization named. All interpretation and opinion expressed is the author's own commentary. Names, show titles, and trademarks remain the property of their respective owners and are used here for the purposes of commentary, criticism, and historical discussion. Every effort has been made to be accurate and fair. Corrections are genuinely welcomed and will be addressed in good faith.